Welcome to Cooking with Cindy. My name is Cindy Lorimer, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make vegan pho. So pho, if you know Vietnamese food, then you've probably had pho. Pho is like the quintessential noodle soup dish in Vietnamese cuisine. Now, most pho are made with beef, right? With the beef broth, and you eat it with slices of beef. There's also chicken pho, right? With a chicken broth, with shredded chicken, etc. So when I created this recipe, I wanted to create a broth that was really nice and like full of body and was meaty tasting, etc. I experimented and I wanted a sweetness but a beefiness to it. So the beefiness comes from the different oysters that I use in this recipe for the broth. And then I layer with like cabbage and Napa cabbage and chayote. This is chayote, along with corn. And to add the sweetness, I do Fuji apples along with Asian pear, and then with all pho broths, whether it's chicken, vegan, or beef, you have your basics for the broth, which are charbroiled ginger, right? Onions and leeks here, and then we top it off with mushroom powder and kosher salt. So let's begin. I'm gonna show you how to make the broth. I know this looks like a lot of ingredients, but once you put it together and once you do it a couple of times, because I know people say to me, well, pho is so intimidating to make because you have to wait hours and hours. Well, really, to make the broth, you just put this all together, bring it to a boil, and then reduce it and let it simmer for 3 hours. None of this thing where I hear people say, pho, you gotta do 24 hours for the broth or 12 hours for the broth. That's an overkill, and I don't agree, because my pho broth, regardless of if it's chicken, beef, or vegan, I only simmer it for 3 hours, and it's full of flavor. So let's begin. With this pho recipe, along with my beef pho recipe, you do it in actually 2 phases. The first phase is to make the broth, and then the second phase is to bring in all the spices, etc. So this is now the first phase. So first we want to bring in the onions. It's crucial to charbroil the onions and the ginger. It gives it a nice smoky flavor, very subtle to broth. With the ginger, I'm gonna want to peel it. And just literally a rough peel. Okay. This is the lazy version of peeling ginger, but we're just gonna go with it. So there you go. Now, with your pots, right? I'm using a 24-quart pot. You need a 24-quart pot for this recipe. What happens is, because there's so many different ingredients, by the time you put water, by the time you simmer it for 3 hours, the broth is gonna be reduced. So you don't wanna spend all this time, hours, making this pot of pho and only have 4 servings or 5 servings, right? This equates to 15 servings. So like for instance, for us, we are a family of 5. So we usually like to eat it for dinner one day and then lunch the next day, or vice versa. If you are a smaller, group in your family, or there's just 2 of you or 4 of you or 3 of you, if it's too much, then I would recommend putting them in the freezer in individual portions so that whenever you have a craving, you can grab it out of the freezer, etc. Okay, so I can smell my onions going and can smell it charbroiling. So look, that's what you want. Like that. And that is a beauty. So while we are waiting for that, let's start loading up our pot. I have a cabbage. Just use a whole cabbage. Just gonna dump it in there. Literally just dumped it in. Napa cabbage, whole Napa cabbage. Put it in there. Now, your corn, 2 ears of corn, 3 leeks. So now I've already cleaned my leeks. So leeks is, what happens is it gets really dirty inside here. So you're gonna want to, when you purchase leeks, wash it. Only use the white part. It comes very long. But then here is where all the dirt is trapped in here. So you want to just take a knife, run it through, and then rinse all inside here, right? So I already did that. I'm gonna dump this in there. My onions are pretty good, okay? So I'm gonna take this and then dump it in my pot along with my ginger. Woo! Okay, turn that off and put it in there. Okay, so cilantro stems. I have cilantro stems here. I removed all the leaves. And then with the stems, you're going to put it in your pot. What's nice is it gives the broth this beautiful scent to it. And it's a very subtle flavor, but it really makes it so aromatic. So I have oyster mushrooms here. You want the mushroom flavor to give it that beefiness. And then portobello mushrooms. Okay, now I saved all the peeling for last. Oh, almost forgot. So white whole mushrooms, right? Just gonna dump it all in there. And then we have kosher salt, half a cup of kosher salt. Half a cup of mushroom powder. Now usually with my pho broth, or you'll see a lot of my noodle soup broth, I always add rock sugar just to sweeten the broth a little bit. But in this case, because we are using all these beautiful vegetables that, and this natural sweetener, I'm not going to use rock sugar in my vegan pho broth. So we're just going to peel everything and leave them whole. You don't need to cut them up, and then just dump them in the pot. So with jicama, it's very challenging to peel, so it's kind of better to just peel like this. You grab the skin and then you just peel like so. It almost looks like, as you're peeling this, it almost looks like a coconut, you know? Okay. In my recipe, I do call for opal squash, right? To go into the broth. I went to the Asian supermarket today and they didn't have any opal squash. And funny enough, I've been growing like, I don't know, more than 50 opal squash this gardening season, and the one time that I need opal squash, I don't have any. So annoying, but it is what it is. It doesn't, by me not having the opal squash in the broth, isn't gonna change the flavor at all. So what's nice is this vegetable broth is very forgiving in the sense that if you don't have like Napa cabbage, it's okay. You can do double cabbage, regular cabbage, etc., vice versa. And then the chayote, like literally you can just do a rough peel. Asian pear is just so great because it is so super, super sweet. So that really helps enhance the broth. Obviously, if you don't have Asian pear, then you can just use regular pear or just add more apples in there. Again, this broth is very forgiving in that sense. And you know, people have said to me, they're like, well, why don't you just not make pho at home and just like go to a restaurant and buy it? It'll save you a lot of time. Well, one, we're a family of 5, right? So it's worth it for us to make homemade pho. And on top of that, I get so disappointed when I go out to restaurants. Well, one, most Vietnamese restaurants won't have vegan pho, right? And even when they do, it is so one-dimensional. So it doesn't have the layers of flavors that this recipe does. And I just find that, you know, it's just always better homemade. You know exactly where each and every one of your ingredients came from. Tastes super clean. Okay, that was a lot of peeling. Let's head on over there. So we're gonna dump all of these in here. And then with this pot filler, literally you just fill it all the way to the rim, bring it to a boil. Once it starts boiling, then we reduce it, and that's when the clock starts ticking. You don't start the clock ticking right now. You start the clock ticking after it starts to boil, because that usually takes quite a bit. It might take even half an hour for it to boil. But once it does, you bring it down to a simmer, which I'll show you. It's a big pot to fill. 24 quarts. But you know, all of my other noodle soup recipes, I use 24 quarts. So if you're following along with me and doing all my other noodle soups, this is a great investment to have. Okay, I literally filled it almost to the rim. And the reason why I do that is because I can get as much broth as possible. Because if this is gonna be time consuming, you better believe I wanna have as much broth as possible. So we move on to phase 2 of the pho recipe. Again, please don't be turned off by how intimidating it is, right? These are just all the spices that one uses for pho. So I do the same for vegan pho. Now, my kids, who are super meat eaters, so is my husband, they absolutely love and prefer the vegan broth over the pho broth, only because it tastes so clean and so light, but you're not missing out on that robust flavor from the beef broth. So I'm just gonna start prepping everything just so that I'm ready to go for phase 2. So I'm gonna start with my spices just to show you guys. So these are pho tea bags. I have them in these canisters, but I buy them from Amazon. They're called Pho Hoa. They have different brands. Pho Hoa is PHO space HOA. I don't have the actual box to show you because every time I buy them, I put them in here. But these are, I call them tea bags. They're all the powdered spices in there. So this just enhances the broth flavor. Then I have black cardamom pods, right? There's black or green. I use the black version. These are what the cardamom pods look like. So I'll do like a heaping tablespoon. So that's a heaping tablespoon, so equivalent to 4. Now, these are whole cloves. So I recommend grabbing and getting a heaping tablespoon. Just gonna add it to this. Coriander seeds. Again, a heaping tablespoon. And then star anise. So star anise is basically the star of the show, right? You can't have pho without star anise. No way. So you're gonna do, I grab a handful. So a handful is probably equivalent to, I don't know, 8 to 10 pieces. So here's star anise. How pretty are they, right? They look like little stars. Okay, I'm gonna add them to my bowl of spices. And then here we have fennel seeds, which has a very licorice flavor to it. Another heaping tablespoon. And whole nutmeg that I'm gonna do 2. And then 2 cinnamon sticks. So there's 2 different types of cinnamon sticks out there when you go to your supermarket. One is just the regular one, and one is Saigon cinnamon sticks. Those are the ones that I like to use. It just has a slightly different hint of smell, taste to it. So 2 of them. But to be honest, if they don't have the Saigon cinnamon sticks, you don't need to go and search for one. Just use regular cinnamon sticks. Okay, so these are my spices, which I'm gonna toast up later, and I'll show you how to do that. So if you have followed along to like all my Cooking with Cindy episodes and all my cooking tutorials, etc., I always like to do a mise en place, always, only because I have a tendency to forget. Even with my recipes, if I'm missing an ingredient, etc. So this is why I prepare everything in advance. Tangerine. So this, I'm gonna just use the tangerine peel. And then this is gonna go into my broth in phase 2, just to give it a nice citrus taste to the broth. And the reason why I don't put the tangerine peel in phase 1 is because if I have this in the broth sitting too long, it's gonna get too bitter. So in phase 2, I will use both daikon and carrots to not only sweeten my broth, but also to use it as vegetables in my bowl of pho. I know a lot of people are like, well, that's weird. But I love it. I just always like to have some kind of vegetables in anything that I'm eating. So to have a bowl of pho without any vegetables to me seems weird, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and peel this. This is a gigantic daikon. Usually, I think at Asian supermarkets, they tend to come really big in size. At a regular supermarket, I believe they're a lot skinnier. So what I now want to do is cut this into bite-sized pieces. So because this is such a thick daikon, I'm gonna cut it in 4s like this. Like this size. Some of them are too big, so I'm just gonna cut them a bit smaller. Now we peeled the carrots. Our family loves carrots, especially in the noodle soup. And then with the carrots, you're gonna want to peel them. First cut off the ends, then peel them. Okay. You don't wanna cut the carrots too small, because we're gonna cook it in the broth for an hour, so then all the flavors can infuse and simmer, etc. So I wanna cut the carrots into maybe this length, just so that it doesn't disintegrate. If I cut it too small, it's just gonna disintegrate into the broth. So like so. Okay, like that. So I have bean curd sticks, which are these. Again, if you can't find them in your Asian supermarket, then you can order them online. These are dried bean curd sticks, so you just need to soften them and soak them in water. So you're saying, what are these? These are weird looking things, right? Bean curd is another name for tofu. And so then these are bean curd skin sticks. So this is the skin of the tofu. So what happens is when you're making tofu, you get a film on top, right? As you're cooking the tofu, you get a film on top, and that film or that skin is what this is. And so then this is just dried up. I'm gonna use 6 of these. So looks like this. So it's like probably 12 inches long, right? So I'm gonna soak that. See, this has been broken off. So I'm gonna count this as 1. So this is 1, 2. To be honest, you can use as many or as little as you want. I'm just letting you know 6 so that gauge it somehow. Okay, so that should be good. We're gonna let this soak for 15 minutes so that it just rehydrates. I'm using firm tofu. You can use firm tofu or medium tofu, and I'm gonna fry these tofu up. I'm actually gonna show you 2 different ways to fry them. One is through regular stovetop in a fryer or a deep fryer, and then one is to air fry, just so that you can see the difference. The reason why I don't like to air fry everything is because not everyone has an air fryer, so I like to do it the old school way. Well, anytime I'm using tofu, I would like to, let's grab this bowl here. Just remove the water. And then this is why I have a paper towel here, so that I can line the tofu with paper towel just to absorb all the water, so that when I'm frying it, when I'm deep frying it, it's not splashing everywhere. So this is how I like to do my tofu. Now with your tofu, you're going to want to cut them into bite-sized pieces. And then I like to flip it over, cut it through. Okay, my timer's going off to fry my tofu. Anytime I'm frying anything, I always like to make sure that the oil is at 380 degrees. I'm gonna drop it in here. It's very important when you're frying and you're not using a deep fryer and using a pot like this to only fill the oil no more than halfway through. Only because if you fill it more than halfway through, when you're cooking anything, it's gonna bubble, and then the oil's gonna spill over, and that's how fires are created. I'm just gonna move it around a little bit because it tends to stick at the bottom, so I don't want it to stick at the bottom. So I like to just move it a little bit once I put it in. I just wanna show you with the bean curds, what you do is if you have a container like this where I have it in, and it's not completely, because it tends to float on top, I just flip it over like this halfway through, just to make sure that all sides get rehydrated. Okay, option 2 to fry your tofu is to air fry it. So again, we're going to cut it up like we did before. Now then you're gonna place it in here and drizzle a little bit of oil in one layer. I don't want to pile them up because they're just gonna crumble. And drizzle olive oil or any regular cooking oil. And then let's put it in here. Turn on the power, and then I'm gonna fry it, right? I'm gonna basically fry it and hit the French fry button. Press start. Let's go over and check out our tofu that's actually frying. Look at how beautiful that is. That's a little bit too light, so we want something a little bit darker than that. See, they always tend to stick together. So I always have to check on these guys. and separate them. Beautiful, huh? Okay, so multitasking at this point. We're waiting to cook this batch up. Then I have a shallot that I'm going to slice, and I'm going to show you what to do with it in a little bit. Okay, so my tofu's done. Come and take a look. Beautiful. So professional looking. Now with our bean curd, let's remove it. So here you want to see, you know how they have rehydrated, so then it softens. If it doesn't hydrate all the way like this has, it's fine, it'll cook. And plus you're gonna immerse it in the broth anyway. But I'm gonna cut this into 2-inch pieces. Okay, now, yep, 25 minutes and at 380 seems perfect for this. So let's compare the difference. To be honest, it's not massively different, and you know, it'll probably be better to do this at 30 minutes instead of 25 minutes. But here, we're gonna do side-by-side comparison. So this is regular deep fryer. And then this is from the air fryer. Not much of a difference, right? Pretty awesome. You can choose whichever one. If you don't have an air fryer, don't need to use an air fryer. So look, it's now boiling, right? It took, I don't know, 30 to 45 minutes. So we're gonna reduce this down to a simmer, so maybe a medium low. You want it to be just bubbling like this. You don't want a hard boil. You want it to just bubble like that. Okay. So I have my cast iron skillet going. I've been warming it up. So anytime I use cast iron skillet or a metal pan, I always do it on medium low and heat it and warm it up for 5 minutes just so that it becomes more of a non-stick pan. That's what I did in this case. Turned up the heat, drizzle avocado oil. I love cooking with avocado oil, or use any neutral cooking oil. Then I have my sliced shallots that I'm just gonna fry up here. You wanna do this for, I don't know, a minute on medium-high heat or high heat. Okay, so then I have an assorted variety of oyster mushrooms. Here it is. I like to use these only because they kind of mimic like beef slices for me. Or you can use king oyster mushroom and slice them into like, you know, an inch thickness, and that will kind of feel like you're having beef balls. Okay, so then I'm gonna leave the oyster mushroom intact only because they're so delicate. So I know that they'll probably not disintegrate, but they'll separate a little bit as I cook them. So let's throw them in here. Turn my heat down to medium right now, just because I don't want to burn the shallots. Now we're going to use Chinese 5 spices. It has a very strong, beautiful smell to it. And Chinese 5 spices is like, for this particular one, it has cinnamon, star anise, fennel seed, cloves, ginger, white pepper, licorice root. So it has this beautiful, intense smell. So I'm gonna sprinkle it over here. Do a generous pinch of black pepper, a generous pinch of salt. Kosher salt is what I always use, and a generous pinch of sugar. Let's toss this. Now, this is a bit too not big enough, so maybe a pot would have been better. But I love cooking with a cast iron skillet only because it gives it such a better flavor and it browns everything so much nicer. And look at this. You don't want to fiddle with it too much because you want the oyster mushrooms to brown. So you're just going to cook this for, I don't know, a few minutes. See how beautiful this brown is now? This mushroom is brown like that. Stunning. Stunning, stunning, stunning. So I have my heat back up to medium-high. Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. I'm just tossing it quite a bit right now only because I threw in the Chinese spice powder, and so then I want to make sure that it gets to all of these. Now that I've tossed it quite a bit, I'm just going to spread it so that it's all leveled like this. And then I'm going to let it cook untouched for 2 to 3 minutes. Look at that. So I'm going to turn this off now. I don't want it to burn. So you're going to want quite a bit of oyster mushroom. Here I was just showing you close to 2 pounds, but my recipe actually calls for 4 pounds of oyster mushrooms. So if you want it to be brown like this, I recommend doing it in 2 batches. You can just do it in a pot. You won't get this nice caramelization with just a regular pot. Better with like a metal pan or a cast iron pan, or even a nonstick pan. That's totally fine. So this is just my preference. We have a lot of things going on at the moment. I have my boiling pot of water for my pho noodles. I have my 2 batches of the tofu and the mushrooms and my spices. So now my broth is ready. I'm going to scoop this all out and discard them. I'm not going to use these. Do you see how there's not much water left? I mean, there is a lot, but you know, after removing everything and after simmering for 3 hours, it's like you have almost half left, a little bit more than half left. Well, basically half now. Okay. So if you see here, when you dump this out, you're gonna see there's a lot of fluids in here. I don't know if you can really see here. So I wanna transfer it back to the pot only because this is like liquid gold, so I don't wanna be throwing this away. I'm gonna carefully do this. Do you see how much liquid there is? So if you had dumped this is like a good couple of bowls at least. Oops. The cabbage and the Napa cabbage just holds so much of the water. Look at that. Squeeze it all out. Heavy arm lifting work here. Wow. Same with the Napa cabbage. Now you never want to cook the cabbage too long in the soup because then it'll be bitter. So I find that 3 hours simmering is just the perfect amount. Just gonna squeeze it out. Now we go back over there, and then what I'm gonna do is dump this. So this is 24 quarts. This is 16 quarts. So usually what I do is I'll transfer the broth from the 24 quart pot into the 16 quart pot. If you don't have 16 quart pot, it's okay. Just use the same pot again. But I just seen that I already have one. I'm just gonna transfer it over, and I have my strainer here. A lot of manpower here. So seeing that the pot is really heavy, there's a lot of fluids in there. I don't want to burn myself. So to be safe, I'm using a measuring cup, which has higher heat resistance. So it's not going to, because the broth is so hot, so piping hot, that it's not going to make this break. So, because I want my broth to be as clear as possible. So I'm straining it, removing everything just so that I can have a super clear broth. And usually what I do is this is how I measure my serving bowls. So it's basically 1 quart per bowl, per serving bowl, right? That's how I measure things. So this is, if this fills up and it's 15 or 16, that means I have 15 serving bowls. Wow. So I have my pan going. I want it to be nice and hot so then I can add my spices, to toast my spices, just so that all that smell, aroma from the spices come out. But in the meanwhile, while I'm waiting on that, I have 2 batches here of the tofu mushroom. And then I did a second batch here, which I didn't show you on camera. So with my second batch, I use maitake mushrooms, which is similar to shiitake mushrooms, but a little bit more woody in flavor. But it looks kind of like oyster mushroom. So here I want you to zoom in. So I sauteed this just like I did with the previous batch. But do you see how it has that, like, where it looks like slices of beef, right? It'll have that similar texture. We're just going to dump all of this into the pot. So we're just gonna scoop this in. Do the same with this second batch. And to be honest, you can actually use any type of mushroom you want. You can do shiitake mushroom. If you don't like mushroom, you don't even need to use mushroom. You can do only tofu, or you can add whatever vegetables you want in there. Really, whatever your choice is and your preference. All right, so this cast iron pan is pretty hot right now. So I'm going to just, now you don't want to burn your spices. So it's very important. You see how I had it on hot and then I turned off the heat. So I'm gonna add this in, give it a stir. And you'll see, do you see smoke coming out? I don't know if yeah, you can probably see that. So that tells you that it's toasting, but then you're not burning it. The last thing you want to do is burn this, because then it'll taste too bitter, and then your pho broth is no bueno. Gosh, you can smell it now. See all that? Now, if you accidentally burn your spices, start over. Don't even try to save it. And another thing I want to tell you is, I know I mentioned it earlier, these black cardamom pods, this is what you want for like to make soups and stews and curries, etc., etc. The green cardamom pods that I mentioned before, you don't want to use them because they're more for like cooking sweet desserts, etc. So they're 2 different things. I mean, they're the same thing, but but two completely different flavor. So you want the black ones. I'm gonna put it all in here. And the reason why I want to put it in a tea strainer or a tea bag is because I don't want all the spices to be floating around, and then when I start serving my pho, I'm going to be biting into these spice pellets. Okay. Dump this in here, turn it on high, add our tangerine peel, add our pho tea bag, our daikon and carrots. This is gonna sweeten the broth even more, and plus it's just so tasty to eat with your pho. I mean, filled to the rim. Remember my vegan fish sauce that I mentioned to you before? So here I'm gonna add my favorite brand. I'm gonna add a 1/4 cup into this pot. Wait. We're gonna bring this to a boil, then we're gonna reduce it to medium low and let it simmer for 1 hour, and then we're ready to serve and eat. Smells so good. Can't wait. While that's going, I'm gonna make my pho noodles. So these are the pho noodles that I absolutely love. They have at the supermarket or the Asian supermarket, the green ones just like this. To be honest, I don't even know what the difference is. I don't even think there's a difference. I don't know why one's green and one's pink, but it doesn't matter. They taste exactly the same. Now with pho noodles, you just need to bring the water to a boil, like you see over there. I'm gonna show you. So my water's boiling. I want to get all of my packages ready because it literally takes 5 seconds to cook. We're gonna have to be really fast in doing this because the worst thing you want to do is overcook your noodles. Never, 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 never overcook your noodles. All this time and effort that we put into making this beautiful broth will be completely ruined if the noodles are overcooked. So if you have overcooked noodles, throw them away and do another batch. Like such a faux pas for me. It's a big no-no. I can't stress it enough. Okay, let's do it. Give it a swirl. Turn the heat off. And let's go over to the sink. Okay. Give it a rinse. And I'm rinsing it more to just completely cool the noodles because I don't want the noodles to cook even more than it should be. And this is obviously with cold water. So an hour has passed. I have my bowl of the pho noodles. And then here I just want to show you the herb plate, right? So I have lemons or limes. This is actually limes that turned yellow because they were on the tree for quite some time. So that's a little tidbit. Limes do turn yellow when they're overly mature on the tree. Basil. So then these are cinnamon basil, right? You'll see the purple flowers. It has such a distinct smell to it. This is the basil that you usually eat with pho. Obviously, you can use whatever basil you want, Italian basil, etc. And then jalapeno peppers, slices of onions, And then bean sprouts. You can also do culantro, which is what I love. It's Mexican cilantro, but I don't have it right now. Or you can do really whatever herbs you want. The choice is yours. So let's go and pour this over. You want to simmer it for an hour only because you want the spices to infuse in the broth. You want to be able to cook the daikon and the carrots. You want all these flavors to blend together, etc. And then be careful with the tea bag because if the broth is boiling too hard, it can pop this. And if it pops this, your broth becomes super cloudy, etc., etc. So just be careful with that. That's very delicate. Okay, so now the moment. And look at that, the tofu skin, right? It almost looks like tripe. If you know regular pho, you'll know what I mean. But just a bowl of absolute yumminess. I always have in my fridge a container full of chopped cilantro and green onions. You'll see here, because I use that for garnish for everything. Gosh, it smells so incredible that like my mouth is literally watering at this point. Look at the broth, right? It looks like a beef broth. And look at this. How meaty does that look? Okay, one last thing before I do this taste test. I have a ramekin with hoisin sauce and sriracha. This is the only hoisin sauce that I will use. This is the only brand that I'll use. Anything else, I probably won't even have pho. No, that's extreme, but still, this is the only brand I like to use. With pho, if it's a good broth, you never, ever, ever have to put hoisin sauce into your broth. That's a big no-no. The only reason why someone puts hoisin sauce in the broth is because there's not enough body and flavor in the broth itself. So that means you're doing something wrong if someone's doing, if you need to put hoisin in your broth. Okay, so let's taste. Oh my God. This is so incredible. Jesus. Okay. I love tofu. So I'm going to dip in my hoisin. Wow. All the flavors are just sensational. Let's taste. Let's taste this. It has the texture of tripe. And then let's have the oyster mushroom. I love hoisin sauce, so I'll dip anything in hoisin sauce. Wow. That, I know it's my own recipe, but that's a 10 out of 10. Fantastic. Layers and layers and layers of flavor. Oh my gosh. Please, if you love pho, you're vegan, you want to do vegan, whatever it is, you're feeding vegan friends, you will blow their mind away with this.